The Wharfedale press was invented in 1858 by David Payne. It was the first machine to use the travelling bed, which delivered the print without stopping the machine. It can produce 600 to 800 copies an hour, and the 1916 proclamation is said to have been printed on a machine like this.
The machine was built in circa 1854-1856. It's made by a company called Dawson in Oatley in Lancashire, and it's a letterpress printing machine, quad demi, that's 35 inches by 45 inches printing sheet, and it has a full-size form. This one is a small form that we have on at the moment, but it's used in the old printing days for printing magazines, booklets, bus timetables, things of that nature. It was hand-fed by a lady, and she would feed the machine approximately 600 to 800 sheets per hour. One side of the sheet only, it had to be turned over to be printed on the reverse side. It'd take anything from crown, which is 20 by 30, up to 35 by 45. You can print from anything from half-tone blocks, monotype, linotype, stereotype. Any of those things can be printed on this machine. But when the cylinder is made ready, the type, nor plates, none of them are constant in height. They should all be 0.918 of an inch, but they don't come out that way, unfortunately, because mechanical things never work the way they should. So a machine minder's job was to put the form on, ink it up, get an impression, and have a look what needed to be cut out to bring it down. It was bursting through the paper. What needed to be patched up to be legible. And when the machine minder had done that, might take him 2-3 sheets to do it, he would bring it to his overseer and say, is that ready to go ahead? The overseer would look and sign it and say yes or no, do this, that or the other. The machine minder would come back to the machine, do whatever alterations were necessary, again bring it to his overseer and say, is that okay for going ahead? And he would say, yep, that's fine, go ahead and run. Well, this is a single colour machine. We printed black only mostly, but it could be used for 4 colours. In my day in printing, 4 colours were printed in succession. You printed the yellow. When the job was finished, you put on the next set of plates. You printed the red, did the same thing, put the blue, and then the black. And the black we called the key, because the black could always be expanded slightly at the edges to cover up any overrun that might have been on the other colours. The only problem I had was drying. If your ink's dried, the second ink wouldn't take. If it stayed too open, the whole lot would rub off. So it's the skill of the machine minder to know how much dryers to have in or how much reducer to have in the ink to make it work and be malleable on the job that you're doing. The machine minder's job was to set the ink in the duct fountain, which is down at the opposite end of the machine. As far as the plates themselves are concerned, they were all mounted on wood. And wood is not stable either. If it's wet, the wood will swell. If it's very dry, it'll contract. And wood is cut by a circular saw, which again isn't 100% accurate. So you put a block on, half-tone block on, take an impression, you mightn't see anything. So you have to take the block out and what we called underlay it. You would cut a piece of card or paper, put it underneath, stick it underneath it, put it back in, get another impression, have a look. And then this particular block that I have here is a house. And the house needs to be foremost. So what we would do is cut what we call an overlay. You get an impression, take it out and cut away the highlights and the mid-tones and stick the house on there. So it gives you an extra impression to make the black really black and make the highlights fade away and mid-tones to black. The same thing with the 4-colour job, you did exactly the same thing. The make ready was the most important part because you're going to run on these. I know it's going back, but we did print up to 25 and 30,000 impressions on these machines. So the make ready had to be done properly. Otherwise, halfway through, it would start to deteriorate and you'd have to go through it again. We used newsprint for patching up. We used bank paper. We used bond paper. We used tissue paper, and we used manifold paper, depending on the complexity of the job that you were doing. Packing paper to go on the cylinder is folded over about 1.5 inches, 1.75 inches, and folded down flat. I then have to take it and place it on the cylinder itself. The cylinder is round further, the grippers open like that, as they are there. you put your packing in, and again there's a bar underneath that fits over the packing sheets and holds it in position. When that's tightened up, you let your grippers come down and your packing is now on the cylinder. Go round to the back and you tighten the bar at the back. We'd open the back, lift this sheet forward, first and foremost. When you're taking an impression, we would inch it around, and with the printed sheet still in the grippers, stab each corner with the bodkin, right? And you take the sheet out, cut the corners away down to that point, because your packing is pierced as well as your sheet. So when you've done your make ready on the printed sheet, you can put it exactly where it came off. And your make ready goes onto the printed sheet, or onto the form I should say, as it should be. Now, as I said, you may have to do that once, you may have to do it twice or 3 times, but that would be the process you would go through. Open the packing at the back, lift the top, stick your sheet down, and each sheet that you put on, you would stab to make sure you put it in the same place. And that is a make ready as it would be done. Normally, when the machine minder had completed the make ready and got the job passed by the overseer as being ready to run, he would call a lady, one of the younger women in those days, not 2 young women, to come as a feeder. And their sole job was to feed the machine. They didn't go to any other department when the job was finished. They would come around, clean the machine, dust paper edges have dust, and the dust accumulates on the machine, as you can see around the sides. They would come around with a rag and clean off the dust. They had Brasso, and they would clean the brass plate on the side of the machine up here, Dawson, Payne and Elliott. And any the ones that they had in my factory in Bray and in Alex Thom had brass sides on them as well, and they would clean off the brass. That Dawson, Payne and Elliott there was on a brass plate, and that would be polished. And again, they would go around the floor and about a metre out from, because I'm talking in metrics, about a yard out from the machine, they would clean with machine oil and paraffin and clean the floor. So any ink that the machine minder might spill when he was bringing it over to put it in the duct, they would clean it up in the, and then they would sit at the back of the machine and they would do their knitting. And they could be there for 2 or 3 hours. But whenever you needed them to go on the machine, you simply said, "I'm ready to go now, Mary. Feed this for me, please." And Mary would come down and stand here for the day, and she would do what I'm going to do now.